After they got back from the revival, of course, Annie's very sick. So Reese, they
This
get
part
back
made me
late at night.
cry.
I know. I was like, okay, we've got to talk about this part.
So good.
Reese doesn't go in the house, but he climbs up the tree to watch her sleep through the window, which sounds very cringe, but it's sweet. He eventually sleeps into her room and he prays over her. He prays, Lord, he said, I'm not too sure about tonight, meaning the revival.
Yeah.
And I really don't think that preacher has any kind of special deal with you. But I know what I'm trying to say is, if you're all out of options, then let's give Emma my heart. It's a good, strong heart. Well, Emma wakes up and says, you can't give me what you don't have because you've already given me your heart.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Hey everyone, it's Brett and Charity, and we are back today to talk about a book that Charity picked. You want to tell them what we're reading today and what we're talking about?
Absolutely. So today we are going to talk about the book When Crickets Cry by Charles Martin. It is a faith-based novel, but not overtly.
No.
I didn't feel like anything was super pushy about that.
No.
So I would recommend it to anyone.
Uh-huh.
And it was really good.
It was really good.
I loved it.
I'm glad you picked that one.
I'm so glad.
Yeah,
so glad.
yeah, and he has been on my list of books to read. So, but before we get into the book, I kind of want to just to ask you about. So, this is your second podcast.
It is.
This is your second time to be on a podcast. So, tell me what your experience was like. How did you feel about the last one we did, since that was your first one?
I was so nervous leading up to it, so nervous. But after I watched it, I was like, okay, I didn't do terrible.
No, you didn't do terrible.
And it was kind of weird, like seeing myself on video.
Yeah.
But I still really enjoyed it. I mean, I've always enjoyed watching yours and Melanie's together. And so I just thought it was super fun. And so when you invited me to do it again, I was like, absolutely. I want to do it again. And my husband, he was like, I'm really proud of you. Like, that's way out of your comfort zone and you're doing a good job. And so I was like, he watched a few minutes of it. He didn't watch the whole thing.
Just enough to support you.
Just enough to be supportive. Yeah. He's like, I'm not a reader. And I was like, I know. He goes, but you did good. I'm proud of you. I was like, okay, thanks.
Well, when you have podcasts like this, you don't actually have to read the book. You can just watch it and be like, okay, that sounds good.
Now, if we were talking about like cows or roping or anything to do with rodeo, then he'd be all about it.
He'd be all about it. I'm just saying we could probably do a cowboy novel, a Western.
We should. And then I'd be like, you have to listen to this.
Because I'm telling you, you cannot look at Christian books without running into a Amish book,
absolutely,
or a Western cowboy book.
Pioneer, a lot of Pioneer days.
Not a single one of them. Like, I don't care anything about Amish books, and we are going to do an Amish book at some point.
There are some decent ones.
Yeah, and actually, I did read, and I can't remember the name. Beverly LaHaye,
yes,
wrote, and they were adapted into movies.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sherry Stringfield played.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I did.
Gotta go find those.
Well, in fact, I think I watched the movie because I used to be a huge fan of ER, and Sherry Stringfield played on ER. So, of course, when I heard that she was going to movies, I was like, oh, gotta watch that.
So when I was pregnant with Stella, I was just looking for something to binge, and I got started back on ER. Yeah. My mom watched it when I was a little kid. I remember her watching it like every day that it aired, like when the new episodes would come on.
Yeah.
She was like, that was her time, and the TV was hers because she was going to watch ER. And so I was like, I wonder if that's really as good as, and it totally is. It has stood the test of time. It is still excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I binge watched all of them.
Yeah.
So good.
To this day, it's still one of my favorites.
I think it's so much better than like Grey's Anatomy or
so much. Well, I mean,
it's totally where they got the idea for Grey's Anatomy.
Totally.
100%.
But I don't know how you are, but like movies today are not as good as they were in the 90s.
No,
TV shows not as good as they were.
We do not watch anything at our house really anymore that is like, with the exception of Bluey, which is a children's TV show that is actually from Australia.
Oh.
Disney has now bought, I don't know if they've got the rights or whatever, just the streaming, but it originated in Australia. It's about a blue heeler family. I know you don't have kids. I know you're not probably into cartoons, but it is super good. And the episodes are only like 7 minutes long. So they're just little bites.
Just perfect for kids.
They're perfect. They're just right for like Bellamy. She's 2. It really holds her attention for 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
and sometimes mama needs 7 minutes.
That's right. That's long enough for me to unload a dishwasher or reload a dishwasher.
Exactly.
Or,
or go to the bathroom and
run
scream.
to the bathroom for a minute. Yeah. Lock myself in. But
you're a parent when you go to the bathroom to have a few minutes of peace and quiet.
To hide from your children.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
But we don't watch anything really with the exception of that's not older. Like, we watch a lot of older TV shows, older movies.
Yeah.
Because they're clean. I don't have to worry about my kids for the most part. I mean, there are some.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I don't think the new stuff is...
It's just, It's like, and does nobody have an original thought anymore? And I get it. We live in a world where we're just saturated in everything. We're saturated, in things to watch.
Yeah.
We're saturated in things to read.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, there are very few books that I read that are totally original because everything's been written.
Yes.
But there are very few movies that ever come out that I'm like, oh, I think I need to go see that because it's just.
I think the last movie we went to see, I don't even remember what the last movie was that we went to see.
I went and saw something around Christmas time.
Oh, I took the kids back in the summer to go see The Wild Robot.
Oh.
It was actually really
never
cute.
even heard of that.
It's a Disney, it's Disney or Pixar, one of the two, maybe DreamWorks. I don't know. One of those big 3, but it was actually really, really good. I didn't expect to like it as well as I did, and I think I might have enjoyed it more than my kids did. So there's that.
There's that. Every once in a while they'll crank out a good one. But
it was different. It was not anything that I expected. So I mean, if you're looking for just a random,
check it out.
But it's not a lot hard. Once you get to the end of it, it's emotional.
Oh, well.
I was emotional.
I don't mind feeling some emotion.
But we've discussed that, and I'm a crier. I cry at everything, so.
Oh, see, and I don't. I'm not typically a crier. So if I'm crying.
Emotional.
Yeah.
So,
well, tell us a little bit about, what'd you learn about Charles Martin?
Okay, so Charles Martin is from Jacksonville, Florida, where he lives with his wife and 3 boys. Listen, y'all, it was kind of hard to find information. And I don't know. We were talking about this. We don't know if it's the difference in female authors and male authors.
He's a male author.
Even on his website, there was just not a whole lot of fluff information. Women, we want a lot of the details of all the little.
Yes.
Just tell us every little thing. We're happy about it. My husband, though, that's not him. He's very high level.
Yeah. Well, and I can say as an author, it's hard to write a bio. To write your own bio. Yeah.
Well, because you're kind of tooting your own horn.
Yes. You don't want to oversell yourself, I guess. I don't know, but
True.
One of the hardest things is to write a book description, condense an entire book down to a couple of paragraphs.
Yeah.
And to write an author biography.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing. Yeah.
So what I did find though is that Mr. Martin, like I said, he and his wife live in Jacksonville, Florida with their 3 boys. He has written over 20 books. 15 or 16 of those are nonfiction or are fiction, and then there are 5 that are nonfiction.
Okay.
So, there's something for everybody there. He does have a novel that was adapted into a movie called The Mountain Between Us.
Every author's dream.
2017. It is, right? I'm sure, because then royalties even get bigger.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And then his book that we read today, When Crickets Cry, was actually winner of the 2007 Christian Book Award. So he's very well established. He's a New York Times bestselling author multiple times over. So he's got quite the body of work.
He does, yeah.
And all kinds of different novels from what I could find. They're not. It doesn't seem like he sticks to any one specific formula or cookie cutter. Yeah. So something out there for everybody if you're interested in reading one of Mr. Martin's novels.
Yeah. Is this your first to read of him?
This was my first.
Me too. He was on my list of authors I wanted to read. Because I told you if you wanted, you could pick the book for this episode. And
I'm super indecisive, so I sent him 6 books that I was like, okay, what about these?
Yeah, and the minute I saw his book, I was like, okay, that's the one we got to read because he's been on my list for a while. And for me, I got almost a Nicholas Sparkish type of vibe.
Similar. That southern setting, I think, is what did it.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know, and something we talked about in the last podcast was how you look at cover art. That's a big thing for you. And I said that that's not really a big thing for me. But that was one of the things that drew me in.
Was it?
About this book was the cover art. I was like, that's really just peaceful and pretty looking. And
yeah.
So I was really hopeful that like the novel was going to kind of be peaceful and hopeful and all those things.
And the cover art for this book, it almost, you want to hold that up and show it to them?
Sure.
The cover art almost gave me
very pretty.
When the Crawdads Sing vibes to it too. Yeah.
That's true.
So
similar. Also set in the South.
And that's another one I want to read and talk about on the podcast at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen the movie, but I have not read the book.
Yeah. And I almost told an anecdote about it, but I'm going to wait because at some point I want to do that book. Yeah.
The books are always better than the movies, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because you just can't get all of the details that you get in the book in a film because you got to condense it.
Exactly. Because, people have short attention spans.
Yeah.
And so, which nobody wants to sit through. I mean, a movie has got to be very good if it's more than 2 hours. Okay. Titanic got away with it, but there are very few.
Yeah. Well, and like, we kind of talked about my obsession and love for Tolkien last time.
Yes.
And so like The Hobbit and then all of the Lord of the Rings movies, those are very long. Like,
the movies are?
The movies are like 3+ hours long, all of them. And so like if you're watching all of the Lord of the Rings, there's like 3 or 4 movies in that. And it takes, like you can watch them, it takes a whole day if you're going to watch them all in order.
Yeah.
Which my kids are now used to, but.
So what makes those movies interesting to you with them being so long? Like, is it because there's a lot of action?
Well, you get action and then you get, there is some action, but then there are moments where it's just kind of quieter. I don't know. I just love a fantasy world. I guess because it's an escape.
Yeah.
Like it's so far removed from anything that's happening in my real life.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes you just need to escape.
Sometimes you just need an escape.
This cruddy world we live in.
So, I'll go hang out in Rivendell for a day. Or whatever.
Yeah.
So what was your, like, having read it, what's your just high-level impression of When the Crickets Cry?
I really enjoyed the book, but there are some parts of it I did not like.
Okay.
For me, it was very hard. There were parts of it that were very hard to follow.
Okay.
Because, this is kind of a dual timeline book.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of flashbacks.
Yes. And he doesn't tell you when you're going back into a flashback.
Yeah.
And there were several times when I got into reading it that I'm like, all of a sudden, you're reading about Annie and Reese, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, it's talking about Emmy now. Emma now. And there's no indication at all that you've moved into, and sometimes it happens in a new chapter. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the chapter.
Yeah.
And for me, that was just very
kind of hard to follow.
It was very hard to follow because you never knew. And I'm not going to kind of tell what they are at the moment. I'm going to wait until we get into the podcast when we get to it. But there was a couple of places that in there that were like, in the storytelling, he said one thing, but then it turned out to be something else.
Okay. Yeah.
And like that.
Kind of almost like a red herring.
Yes. And I'm like, okay, what just happened here? This is not what I just read a chapter ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get into that. So anyway, so I enjoyed it overall, but for me, it was just very hard to follow just because there was no indication when you were moving from one part of the timeline.
I was surprised. Like, whoa.
Yeah. So how about you? What was your overall thoughts of it?
I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. But I kind of like books like that where you get to know kind of who they were before whatever, because you can tell pretty quickly in this that there was some big event that shifted the course of his life.
Because the book pretty much started.
It takes there is no slow roll into the action here.
No.
So I was kind of caught off guard by really how quickly that moved.
Yeah.
Into that, but then, like you said, it was kind of difficult at first. That first 2 chapters, especially, I think I was kind of like, what is going on? And then once it kind of became clear, like I was really into it. I was like, okay, now I want to know all their backstory. So I loved that we got all those flashbacks and we got to know those characters from children on up.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. When I was growing, I've always been an avid reader.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a trend these days of books, like one chapter is from another character's POV. Then in the next chapter,
someone else.
And of course, every person's name is at the beginning of the chapter. I hate that trend.
You don't like that?
I do not like that trend.
Gotcha.
I mean, does that bother you?
It doesn't bother me. I read a lot of books like that. I think maybe that's part of what was so refreshing with this one for me, though, was that it was just that single point of view.
Yes. Well, and I think it almost, which this book was published in 2006, so it's not a recent publish. No. But it's still relatively new. But this book felt like it felt like an older generation book because it didn't. You follow the modern trends that I often don't like in books.
Yes, it's definitely more of what I would consider like classic literature writing.
Yeah.
Not trendy, not formulaic.
Almost kind of I would almost consider this literary fiction.
Definitely. And I think part of the reason is because this main character is in the book portrayed as an avid reader.
Yes.
And so he references, there are a lot of quotes from classic literature throughout the book. I loved that.
Yes.
I found that just feeding my soul. And I actually have a whole list of things written down at home of different authors now that I want to go read some of their work.
Yeah.
Like Longfellow. He references him and quotes him.
Yeah.
And I've never read any Longfellow. I've not read a whole lot of poetry. And so
I'd never read poetry. Yeah.
I'm going to now. I'm kind of interested in that.
Yeah.
And then Shakespeare is kind of a running theme.
It is.
Throughout it. It's something he shares with Emma. And so I actually have read quite a bit of Shakespeare, and I have a huge anthology of his works, but it's all packed up from when we moved. And so now I'm like, I got to go dig those out and read some of those again.
Yeah, revisit. Yeah.
So I loved, and I think that kind of lends itself to that classic literary fiction feel.
It does. Yeah. Because the character was so in love with that classic literature,
it's
which
I
don't
that was
identify
a language
with
between them.
Yes.
And I mean, I can think of nothing more romantic, but my husband's not a reader, so it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. He wouldn't know a Shakespeare quote if it hit him in the face.
No.
And I can't say much because me either. I'm not into classic literature. I read it in high school because I was getting graded on it.
Yeah.
I've not touched a piece of classic literature since.
So did you have to read like Frankenstein and things like that? Because I had to read that for my AP course.
I don't think I ever read Frankenstein. We did read Dracula in a class once.
I didn't love Dracula.
The Raven. I remember reading The Raven. Poe. Yeah.
I like Poe.
Yeah.
One of my students at co-op is having to read some of that for her class that her mom's teaching. And she's like, why are they making me read this stuff? This is so weird.
It is.
It does not make any sense. And I'm like, listen, you need to like just go into it with an open mind, think about the deeper meanings. And she's like, I don't want to. I just don't want to. So
same. Yeah.
I think a lot of kids feel that way.
Yeah.
I liked Poe. He's very dark.
Yeah. Which I remember being in school, being really excited to read his work because I like mystery suspense, and so, but yeah, I just
did you ever read The Cask of Amontillado?
Parts of it. Yeah. I don't think I finished it.
That one it was a rough read, but once I got to the end of it, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of liked it.
You kind of liked it.
I kind of liked it. It took me a little while to get there though.
Yeah.
But then we had to read, and I remember freshman year very clearly, Romeo and Juliet was the big classic thing we had to read.
Yes.
And in ninth grade, you still are kind of on or I was anyway, of well, do I really want to see boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, all that?
Yeah.
I guess I was kind of a late bloomer when it came to that kind of thing. But all the boys even being like, ew, we don't want to watch that boy kiss that girl, gross.
But they drink poison and die at the end, so there's that.
Drink poison and die, so it's pretty depressing.
It's pretty depressing. And it's I even made an alluded to that in one of my books. I don't remember which one it is. People consider Romeo and Juliet the epitome of romance. Okay.
They were just stupid. They were stupid teenagers.
Dying with your woman is not romantic.
And when you think about they were 14 in that book. She was 14 years old.
Yeah.
It's just depressing.
That's just depressing. Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe there are some romantic elements to it, but I'm like, I don't understand the people.
I guess maybe being willing to stand up against your families,
to
a point. But I kind of disagree with that whole line of thought too. I'm all the time telling my kids, and they're young. Barrett's only 12, but he's starting to kind of hit that point where he's like, I might have a girlfriend someday or whatever,
Yeah.
So I know it's kind of on the horizon, on the radar.
If he's thinking about it.
Yeah. And so I'm always like, listen, someday when you get married, you do not just get to marry that person and it's you two forever. Like, you get their whole family. It's a package deal to a point.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you have to put boundaries in place and,
You're going to have at least 2 Christmases.
But you are. Yes. And so you kind of need to like his family.
Yes, exactly.
Or her family.
You're not just marrying that person. You're connecting yourself to their whole family.
That's right.
Yeah.
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 So
that reminds me, have you seen the new Progressive commercials? I absolutely hate them. I think it's Progressive, the Progressive Insurance, where they're teaching people how to not be like their families, not be like their mom and dad. I hate those commercials.
Yeah, where they're like, all the young people they make them up to look like their parents or like really old or whatever, and they're doing.
And then the guy, the spokesman, he's like, they say something, and he's like, no, we're not going to be our parents. I'm like, I love my parents.
My parents too. I can think of a lot of worse things in life than to grow up and be my parents. Listen, yeah, I mean, if I can like be a tenth of the person that my daddy and my mama Michelle are, like,
yeah,
I'm cool with that.
Absolutely, they are phenomenal people. So,
but not everybody has great parents.
They don't, and that's probably the genesis of that commercial. Somebody probably hated their parents, and so let's turn this into a commercial.
Yeah, I have not seen that many of them because, like we were just talking about earlier, not watching that much TV.
Yeah,
I just don't see a bunch of it, but I have seen a few of those. I like the Emu.
Oh yeah,
the Liberty Mutual.
Oh my gosh! Now I'm gonna have that stupid song in my head the whole podcast.
Liberty.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now all the listeners are gonna hate us.
Yeah. Now they're gonna be like, "Thanks a lot."
Thanks a lot.
It's like my sister. Okay, this is gonna date me, but do you remember? It was Lamb Chop was the character. The song that never ends.
I don't remember that.
Did you not? Okay, so it was a kids' TV show when we were.
No, I do remember the lamb chop.
But you don't remember the song that never ends?
I don't remember the song.
I'm not going to sing it. I will sing it to you after.
Okay.
You will not. It will not come out of your head.
Oh, okay.
It does not go anywhere.
Now, when I hear it, I might recognize it.
Charlie Horse, the other character that was on there, would sing it.
Oh.
And then it would just never quit. And so
okay.
But I'm not going to do it right now because they would hate me.
Well, and plus we might get copyright strikes.
So, yeah. Let's not do that.
Probably not if you sang it, but if we played it. So, and she is a singer, people. So, yeah.
So are you.
Well, yeah. It's been a while since I've sang.
Has it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Probably the last time I sang it was the last time I sang it at church.
Brett.
I know.
Oh, you got to sing. You got to use that gift.
I know. It's been years.
You know, my mother, my real mother, my wild mother, she is a singer, and that's where all of us girls get our voices. And she apparently there's like a huge karaoke scene in this area. Did you know that? In
what?
Like in our area.
No.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
My mom goes every week. Every Tuesday night, they do karaoke like at TGI Fridays.
Really?
And they have like she says it's like a huge group. And then there are other places around town, other restaurants, and I think some bars and places too. But that they go and they sing and like. So
I had no idea.
I don't know if you like karaoke.
I've never been into karaoke. But
she said they have some.
I'm
really
a church
good
singer.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And she even one night she's like, "You should come with me." I was like, "Mom, I'm not doing that." I sing in one place, and that is it.
You can't get me drunk enough, and I don't drink. So.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, Diet Coke is not going to do it. So.
Yeah, that's hilarious. But I mean, hey, it gives you a little
for her. Yeah,
fun little outlet.
A creative, and and
it's good, plain fun. I mean, it's better than
TGI Fridays. They're just hanging out, eating potato skins,
eating and singing
songs.
Can't beat that.
Nope.
Yeah. Well, let's get into this book.
Okay.
Are you excited?
I am.
I am too. Yeah. So the book opens with, and jump in anytime you want. Mm-hmm. The book opens with Annie. She's our main character. She's 13, 14.
I don't think she's even that old.
Is she not even that old?
She's like 7.
Oh, okay. So she's young.
Really young.
She's really young. And she's selling
she's
lemonade.
7.
Oh, 7. Okay. The book opens with her yelling, lemonade, trying to sell. And apparently the people in this town love Annie.
And they know her.
And they will give her $20 for,
She's a fixture.
for a cup of lemonade.
Very sugary lemonade.
Very sugary lemonade, yeah.
Yes.
And of course, there's a reason for why they're so generous to her.
Yes.
She's a sickly child, and she's waiting. She's got heart issues, and so she's waiting on a heart come in so she can have a transplant.
Yes, she's a genetic heart issue.
Yes, and that I really thought that was a very interesting part of the story. It's like some of the reviews I read, the people, like a lot of people complained that there was too much medical stuff. I'm like,
I enjoyed it.
I did too. I totally enjoyed it. I'm like, it
just made it that much more realistic.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. It's like, what do you want to read about if you're not reading about? Yeah. So, I mean, everybody has their own jam and what they like to read.
Was like there was any of that was out of place.
No. And he wrote it in a way
story
that it was easy for people like us who aren't doctors to understand.
Yeah. Well, and two, once you kind of learn more about the character of Reese, the main character, it makes sense why it's written that way.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Because of his profession.
Yeah. So she's in the town. She lives with her Aunt Cindy. Her parents died.
Yeah, so her parents were missionaries.
Yes, okay.
And did you catch the part about where she was actually a twin?
Yes.
And her twin sister died of, I think, the same genetic heart condition when she was much younger.
So clearly this is a hereditary issue that she's struggling with. Yeah.
But her parents were killed.
A lot of tragedy in her family.
Yeah, and you find all this out super quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but you do find out some stuff really quick. The action really
because
up pretty quick.
Literally, you meet Annie. It's from Reese's perspective. He sees this little girl selling lemonade, and then the next thing you know, he buys a cup of lemonade from her.
Yes.
And she gets hit by a car. Or by a truck.
Yeah, I think the cup or the jug or whatever that she keeps her money in, it falls over and some of the bills fly out.
And
so she
going to gather it up.
Goes to gather it up and gets hit by a car. So, of course, at this time, for me, one of the hardest part of reading is the first couple of chapters because you're trying to figure out who's important to the story, who's not, what's going on. And so Reese jumps in to start saving her.
Yeah. So
and he does some extraordinary things that right away. Okay, he's not just a regular person off the street.
Not just Joe Blow off
How
the
does
street.
he know how to do that?
Yes.
And of course, all the people that are around, they're watching this go on, watching him, jump into action, and they're very nervous about it. They're like, what are you doing to her?
He's not as well known.
No, I think he's new to town.
Yes.
Newish. Yeah.
You definitely kind of get the feel that this is like my hometown. We're people have lived there their entire lives.
Everybody knows everybody.
And everybody knows everybody.
And if you don't belong there, everybody knows it.
They know it.
Yeah, for
that
sure.
was definitely how I got that vibe.
Yeah. So he kind of jumps into that, and then it goes to a flashback with, and then the flashback is about Reese and Emma. So do you want to?
Okay, so we probably should have started with the prologue though, because in the prologue he's sitting there and
I think I skipped the prologue. I hate prologues.
The prologue?
I may have read a few chapters. I may have read a few paragraphs, but I think I skipped it.
Okay, so in the prologue, Reese is sitting in a hammock on the lake at his house, and he's holding a letter, but he doesn't open it.
Okay.
And
it turns out there's 3 letters. Yeah.
So there were 3, and this is the last of the 3, and it was supposed to be open 2 years after, but he didn't open it. So now we're several years past that, and he still hasn't opened it.
Okay.
And so Charlie comes and sees him, and he's like, "Have you opened it yet?" And he's like, "No."
Yeah.
So then
he's procrastinating.
And so you kind of have to understand the letters because that's kind of a theme throughout this whole thing.
Okay, yeah.
So
did all 3 of the letters happen in the prologue?
No.
Okay, so I remember the letters. So
because in chapter 2, that's where he finds the safe deposit box that Emma
the key. Yeah.
And that's where
where the letters.
Yeah,
okay.
So he has one labeled to be open now, one labeled to be open after 1 year, and one after 2 years.
Yes.
And that's all they say. And so you're kind of even left wondering,
what's this about?
2 years after what?
Who is it from? Yeah.
Yes.
And that's kind of what annoyed me about the book, because there was he left a lot of things dangling.
Yeah.
Which I get. That's
it's to keep you coming back for more.
Exactly, because you want to come back and know. So you can't give it all up right in the very beginning, because what's the fun in that? But there was a lot of dangling parts in this that Reese's story, you really didn't know until really toward the end.
Yeah.
Exactly, who is he and why does he know all of it?
You don't get it all put together until close to the end of the book.
Yeah.
So when he finds that safety deposit box and those letters, in the second letter, in the first letter, he finds Emma's life insurance policy.
Yes.
The $100,000 life insurance policy. And he didn't know about that. Like, she took that out on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second letter, Emma tells him, and I love this quote, where Emma tells him, like, never forget that you're meant to bind up the brokenhearted.
Yes.
And so when I read that immediately, because of my background, I'm like, oh, is he a minister? Like,
yeah.
Is he in the ministry?
Yeah.
Is that what he's doing? Because that's definitely, I mean, that is a biblical quote.
Yeah.
That is straight from scripture.
Absolutely.
It's like, well, where are we going with it now?
Yeah.
But because then you still have all
that
that
a minister wouldn't be able to crack open someone's chest.
Right. And like, wouldn't know all those terms. Like, because when the EMTs pick up Annie in the first chapter,
he was talking in doctor speak.
Yeah, like it's medical terms.
Yeah, medical
and so you're
terms.
like, oh, okay, what's going on here?
And he did and of course people did start asking, well, how did you, once they realized that he wasn't the villain in his, he really was trying to help her, and he really did, he sort of, like, he wasn't real forthcoming and it was like, well, I used to be an EMT, like
which is true.
He skirted around the issue.
Yeah,
he didn't tell them the totality.
He didn't tell any lies, but he also didn't tell the whole truth.
Yeah, and we'll get more into all that. We don't want to spoil anything right in the beginning.
Exactly.
But yeah, so
she tells him, and then in that second one, she tells him not to forget that he's supposed to bind up the brokenhearted, and then in the third one, he was supposed to open 2 years after.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we learned that, like, Emma has died.
And I'm just saying,
it's been
it
5
takes
years.
a lot of self-control to have a letter and not open it for 2 years.
So now he's at year 5, though, and he still hasn't opened it.
And he still hasn't opened it.
Because of his grief. He
because
just doesn't.
Of his grief.
And I think it even says that in one of those chapters where it's like he had put off opening it because it was going to be like the last conversation that they had.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. This
is heavy.
This book will rip out your heart and stomp on it and put it back in.
Yes, but you'll also there are some hilarious moments too.
There are,
and some great characters like that just lighten things up at the right time.
Well, and we also said the same thing about Cynthia Rushdie's book. It was
that last one we read.
And I think that's the mark of a great. You have to balance out.
Yes.
Otherwise. I
because nobody can stand. I mean, I don't think I could have made it through this novel if the whole thing had been that heavy the whole time.
No.
So you have to have those moments to lighten things.
Yeah. Well, and Melanie and I talked about this on on a past podcast on my very first book that I wrote, A Christmas to Live For.
Uh-huh.
After I wrote it and went back to it to read it, to do the editing and everything, that book was so dark. I told Melanie, I said, if I publish this book, people are going to go to the roof and jump off. So I had to go in and inject some light into it,
levity.
because that was where I was at the time I wrote it, and so he did a very good job of putting in some light into some of the darkness that's in the book. Yeah.
Yes. So then we move on to chapter 3, and I loved this because, again, it harkened back to like my hometown. They get to the hospital. Reese gets to the hospital because he has to check up on this little girl. Now he's invested. I think he doesn't want to be, but he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he comes into the waiting room, and the whole town is in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Like waiting to hear about what's going on with Annie.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh,
it's so Gilmore Girls.
And so that's where we kind of learned that Annie had only been given like 18 months.
Yes.
6 months before that. Or no, Annie had been given 6 months to live, 18 months before that by her doctors in Atlanta. And we also learned she has no health insurance. And so that's why she's selling lemonade.
Yes.
Is to help cover the cost of her bills. And you're thinking like lemonade. But then we also learned why all these townspeople are dropping $20 in there for a cup of lemonade from a lemonade stand.
They're trying to help her.
Yes.
Yeah, because they love her family.
Because they love that little girl.
Yeah. Okay, have we gotten to the part where and I don't know why, maybe it's because I'm a guy, I loved how he got rid of the letters.
No, we didn't talk about that.
Okay. It's such a fun way. Like, he gets rid of the letters, he destroys them, and he makes a boat out of them. He took a wooden plank, made a mast out of the letter, drenched the wood.
He uses a wooden dowel for the mast, and then he turns the letter into a sail.
A sail, yeah. And then he drenches the wood in lighter fluid.
Yeah, or kerosene.
Puts a little candle on it, and then floats it down the water. And then when the candle burns down, it catches the boat on fire. I was
Yes.
like, that is such a guy way to.
I love that, but it also
it
is
was so
something they
cute.
did as kids.
It was
You
something
read
they
that.
did as kids. You
He
don't
and
know
Emma
that.
and Charlie did that when they were kids.
Yeah, and at first you're like, okay, no, that's such a fun, like I would have never thought of that, but it's because he and Emma did that when they were younger.
Did you think? I almost kind of felt like the river was also almost like another character in the book.
It was a huge presence in the book.
It's so prominent. Like a lot of what happens takes place on this river, and then on the lake as well. That's a part of it.
Yeah,
which I guess that's actually a real. I went and looked that up. Did you?
I didn't, and I usually do.
Like he used it actually that whole area. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Have you seen that movie?
I haven't.
You've never seen it?
I've never seen it.
Oh my goodness. It's older, I mean, obviously, but it's really good. And it's set like in North Carolina during the time that all of that would have been flooded.
Oh, okay.
And so to make that lake.
Is it Bowdoin?
I can't remember.
Yeah, they flooded this little town.
They flooded several towns. To make this big lake of this river, with the dam system and all. And so, but the river is a huge part and the lake is a huge part because like he lives on the river.
Yeah.
On a finger of the river. And they do a lot of rowing. Rowing is kind of a big deal.
Yes. He and Charlie.
Who we find out later is his ex-brother. Brother-in-law. Even be ex. Yeah. His brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law.
And he even says that at one point, like, Charlie will always be my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Which I thought was so sweet.
That is such a sweet thing because, sometimes when somebody divorces,
yeah.
people kind of disown them for whatever reason.
Listen, yes.
Yeah.
Personal experience, lived experience with that. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. So I loved and I really enjoyed the dynamic of Reese and Charlie's friendship because you don't get a lot of books that center around male friendships.
You know.
Most of them are centered around female, and it's a very healthy male friendship.
Yes. Yes. And like you could tell that they're both rooting for each other.
Yes.
But they also, it's so cool, like the further you get into the book, the way to see that, like, because I didn't realize when we first meet and like kind of get to know Charlie, it's a couple chapters later.
Yeah.
When they go rowing in the morning.
Yes.
And it like from Reese's watching him, I guess Charlie's at the front of the boat and Reese is at the back.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, from his perspective, I didn't realize until much later, like Charlie's blind.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't realize that until way into the book.
The way that he writes it, Reese doesn't see him as like a blind man.
No.
Reese just sees him as Charlie.
Yeah.
His friend that he loves.
Yeah. Which is a great lesson in life. Don't see people as their disabilities.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
So, and you can tell he's done a lot of work to like make himself as independent as possible.
He has. Well, and that's another thing that people massacred this book over in the reviews because they didn't like the way he wrote him as blind because apparently, he had cables out.
Guide wires.
And apparently several of them were like, well, they don't really do that for blind people. Well, and all the people in the world are blind. Nobody does that.
I have a hard time believing that. I could totally see, because to me, what that reminded me of is like, it's set in the South. We kind of live in the South.
We live in the South. Yeah.
And you kind of just do what you got to do to make things like to make life go. Yeah. I could totally see my husband, like if someone he loved was trying to get from the house to the barn and couldn't see, he would totally go string up a clothesline and be like, "Here, just hold this and go."
Yeah, and they're very rural, so it's not like a blind person could walk out there and never find their way back home if they didn't have some help. So and Charlie's not the type to sit at home and wallow in being blind.
No, you very quickly figure out like he's. Okay, this happened to me. Yes, it sucks. I'm going to make the most of it.
Exactly. I'm going to make the most of it. And he does. He lives life. And
he was one of my favorite characters.
Mine too. I really like him.
Just because of how, obviously that's a heavy thing to deal with.
Yeah.
And you don't really, I didn't realize until much later, like how it happened. And so then I was like, holy moly, that's even more.
You're literally 3/4 of the way through the book before you realize how that happened.
Yes. And it totally threw me for a loop. I was like, this is too much.
Yeah.
This is too much. But just the way that he took that then and still chooses to live, like, because you almost get I almost got the feel of like, Charlie had all this tragedy happen to him, and much of it is the same tragedy that Reese lived through, just from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so Charlie, though, is still out here, like, you can tell he's living life to the fullest for the most part.
And Charlie is Emma's brother.
Yes. Yeah. And we learn later Emma was Reese's wife.
Yes.
And like that they met as young children.
Young children.
And
the book flashes back to their childhood. It was like when
childhood,
they first
adolescence.
Yeah.
You kind of get to grow up with them.
And normally I'm not a fan of children in books. I just don't find children that interesting.
Yeah.
Charles Martin did a very good job because
Absolutely.
I found the flashbacks to especially to their child. I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
And that's when we start seeing
I think he gave us just enough.
Just enough.
It wasn't,
yeah.
You don't get bogged down in the day-to-day like just I mean, because honestly, with kids, I have 3. A lot of my days are very the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that can be very dull, especially if that's not your thing.
Yeah.
And so we don't get bogged down in the day-to-day dullness.
No,
right?
It's all
the
very
grind. It's
pointing
little
back to the main story.
Poignant glimpses of like their story and how it shaped Reese to become the man that he did.
Yes. Yeah. And from a very start,
Mm-hmm.
he met Emma. He knew she was sick.
Yeah.
Mom gives him some pills and says, Reese, you got to make sure she takes these pills at school.
Yeah. Because Emma was very, very young when she had her first heart surgery, and she's got to take all of these supplements and vitamins and
the transplant patients have to.
Oh, yes. Transplant.
Although I don't think she'd had a transplant at that point, though, had she? Yeah, she had. Yeah.
But they have to essentially keep her immune system ready in case a heart became available. Right?
Yes.
So he talked, and I didn't realize that was a thing they did with transplant patients, where they kind of suppress their immune system.
Yeah, they suppress it. Yeah.
Just enough,
but they still have to have enough there that it fights off. Yeah.
So they suppress it so that their body doesn't reject the new organ, which is a foreign body. But also that they don't get so sick that then they can't receive the new organ. Can you imagine?
It's a very fine balance.
I have a whole new respect for the doctors that do transplants now.
Yeah.
Like, what a fine line they must walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and he even talks about that, about how like doctors that do transplants aren't like regular doctors, where like they might do a general surgeon might do a surgery on, say, your appendix. You're going to see them in 2 weeks for a follow-up, and then they're done with you.
Yeah.
But these transplant surgeons,
they're with you forever.
Walking these, I mean, it's a years-long thing with their patients.
Yeah.
That would be a very different type of relationship.
Doctor-patient dynamic.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And from the very start, as soon as he knew that Emma was sick,
he says,
he starts doing all this reading on hearts, and he's like, and he gets kind of frustrated in his reading, like, I mean, we've got this, how old was he? 7, 8, 9, 10 years old?
Yeah, I think they were like 7 or 8.
And he's going to the library and he wants all these books on hearts. And the librarian's like, even she's like, okay, if you're not going to read these, don't waste my time. I'm not.
Yeah, she tells him, she's like, I'm on to you. I know that boys your age are just looking for the nudie pictures.
Yeah,
He's like, that's not at all what's going on.
Yeah, and this is when you really start to realize how special of a kid Reese is.
Yes.
Because he wants to learn as much as he can about the heart, because he wants to fix Emma's heart.
I know, when he says that to her mom,
I almost cried just thinking about it now.
He says, I'm gonna learn how to fix Emma's heart. And
yeah.
I'm just like, oh.
But he found himself getting really frustrated with what he was reading because, okay, how was it he worded it? Because did he say it was too clinical, or it wasn't clinical enough?
Well, I think, isn't that where he kind of figured out that like the condition that Emma had, nobody had figured out how to fix it yet?
Yes.
And so there wasn't a clear
treatment plan.
Yes.
For things like that.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out what I was trying to say.
Yeah, apparently she has a hole in her heart, and that's why she has to take the pills at lunch. She suffers like an anemic episode, gets put in the hospital.
And that part where they're they're needing blood, and so they ask Charlie and Reese to donate blood.
Yeah.
And the way they explain anemia to Charlie, because he's a little boy, he's younger than his sister.
Yeah.
And the way they explain it to him is like that your blood cells are like dump trucks that carry the energy. And he asks if he can just give her all his dump trucks.
All his dump trucks. Yeah. That is so great. Yeah. Yeah, I found that here. He's in the library looking for books. And he starts to realize all of the books are so sterile. They treat the heart as a clump of cells that are there only to be studied.
Yes.
And he wants books that talk about broken hearts, what they feel, how they feel, and why it feels that way. He says feeling and knowing weren't important, only understanding. That's extraordinary that an 8-year-old boy wants that kind of...
Had that kind of foresight.
Yeah.
But he even says that, like, he realized at that moment, this was the purpose God had put him here for.
Yes.
And I wholeheartedly believe that children have those moments where some children just know.
Yes.
From very young ages what they are meant to do. And
they're called prodigies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was definitely a prodigy.
He was definitely a prodigy. Yeah. Yeah.
So we move from there.
Emma kind of keeps getting sicker and sicker. And so out of desperation, Emma's mom takes her to a healing revival.
Yeah.
And, you and I go...
I had such a moment with this.
I did too. And I actually, this is something I wanted to talk to you about because you and I are Assembly of God.
We are.
We are, our denomination is we very much believe in the healing power.
But not that.
That was charlatan.
Yes, like a snake oil salesman.
Yes.
I just read it and I was like, what makes me mad about that is like I have attended services like that.
Yeah.
And like if you have the Holy Spirit living in your heart, you 100% know when it's false.
And it's just the discernment just smacks you in the head.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the part that just made me even more angry is like it talks about when they leave, how that helper approached her dad and
for money.
Yeah, and basically was like, the Reverend's normal fee is $2,000, but $1,000 is acceptable as well.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Yeah. So people that read this, please know that our denomination, it has a very bad reputation sometimes because there are, especially if you watch, I'm not going to name any names, but if you watch certain people on TV, it will turn you off of religion and off of Christianity. And
I think that's
not all Pentecostal of the Assembly of God, not all churches and pastors are like that.
And I'm even at a point now, and I don't know if you've noticed this trend, but I have noticed it where like you see a lot of churches removing their denomination from their church names.
Yeah.
And in a way, I'm not opposed to that.
I'm not opposed to that.
Because it's not about the denomination.
Heaven's going to be full of all kinds of denominations.
That's right. There are going to be Catholics there. There are going to be Protestants there. There are going to be Baptists.
Yeah.
There are going to be
and let's be honest. Denomination is not a man. It's not God.
It's not a God thing.
That's a man-made construct.
Yes.
Yes. So we put too much confidence in the name over the door.
Absolutely.
We need good, solid Bible teaching. If you are in a church where there's good, solid Bible teaching, where they preach the unadulterated Word of God, you've got a gold mine.
Yes.
You're sitting on a gold mine.
And that's what, we kind of went through a transition recently where we left our home church.
I was shocked to hear that. Yeah, because that's your family church.
It's my family church. And, I've attended there basically my entire adult life, all of my young adulthood and adult life. That's where I've gone. And I love my family church. I love my father, who's my pastor, and I love all of our other staff pastors. We didn't leave because there was any sort of conflict or anything like that. We just felt like the Lord had another direction for us and another purpose for us to go help a different body.
Yeah. And it really is a premier church in our area. It really and truly is. Yeah.
I feel like that's because though we have leadership that's committed to speaking the truth. Like they preach the word and only the word.
Yeah.
And our new church is that way. But we did hit a few other churches along the way that I'm just going to be real honest. I would leave those services and be like, this ain't it. Like,
it doesn't take you long to know.
No, man, you can know pretty quick. And I was just shocked at some of the things that were said from the platform or, just the whole feel of it. The prosperity gospel is such a pervasive thing right now. And listen, I'm not saying that God expects everybody to take a vow of poverty and no, not at all.
No.
And I believe that if we are good stewards of the things that he blesses us with, then he will give us more to manage. But I also don't think that it's like God's will that everybody be a millionaire.
No, because if it was, we would be.
Exactly. I just really, when I got to that part, I was just really, I struggled with that because, like, as a pastor's child, knowing ministers, like lots of ministers in different types of ministry, evangelists, which is what this gentleman was, as a traveling evangelist.
Yes. And there's your first clue.
Yeah, my dad did the evangelistic field for several years when I was a young child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard life. I mean, that is a hard life for a family man and, for a minister. But there are, not all traveling evangelists are charlatans, as you said.
No, they're not.
But there are a lot that play on emotions, which is exactly what was happening.
That's exactly,
in this
they
scenario.
knew that they were there specifically seeking healing for her, and
and I really found it interesting too how he wrote it. Like, Reese, the whole family went for prayer with her, but how that preacher brought her up on the stage and like laid his hands on her and was like pushing on her and shoving on her, and then even talks about how he hit her in the head with the Bible several times. And her dad stepped in and was like, "If you hit my child one more time, and so I was
you're going to be picking yourself off the floor, buddy."
But how sad, because I have been in altar services at places where that has occurred. Like, I can distinctly remember a time or two where I have been prayed for by someone, not ever my pastor, but I have been prayed for by other people where, like, I mean, there was like some force applied as they're trying to pray for you, and it's like, whoa.
And they're trying to get a certain outcome.
Yes. And I was so, like, from Reese's perspective, he was so put off by it. And I was like, I get it.
And it makes me wonder if Charles Martin's been in a church service like that.
Yes. Like, oh, who prayed for you and tried to push you down?
Yeah. And so, that really rubbed me in a because I'm like, I don't want everyone to think that's how, because
yes, but it's also a fair thing to write, because it does happen.
It does happen. Yeah.
So because you don't ever, like, I mean, I will tell you, my hackles get up sometimes when I see people post things about, like, Pentecostal churches or charismatic moves or whatever.
Yeah.
Not all of that is illegitimate, but again, it takes the discernment and knowing the Holy Spirit and letting Him help you discern what is truth and what is not.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important that we know the Word, that we be in the Word daily, that we have it inside of us, that we are constantly talking to the Lord.
Yes.
And that we have our own personal solid relationships with the Lord, so that He can guide us to truth and in truth.
And I don't know about you, but I've been in the charismatic church for long enough. I can tell almost very quickly if I have literally gotten up and walked out of services before. Thankfully, I've not had to do it because I'm very discerning about where I will attend church.
I think it's another thing. I mean, if you know people and you have a community of people that you can talk to, that you trust, that know the Lord, they're great resources to be like, hey, have you attended this, or do you know anybody who's been here? I'm not opposed at all to doing research about churches that you're potentially going to visit, or
I think God wants us to do that. God
He tells us to seek out wise counsel.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I thought that was a very interesting scene in there that they kind of, but it also tells you what desperation that they were at to go to something like that.
Yeah, because at that point I think they were teenagers or young teenagers at that point in the storyline.
The storyline progresses pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does. So in amongst all of these flashbacks where we're learning about Charlie and Emma and Reese and how their relationship came to be, you're also jumping back and forth between that and Annie's storyline of, like, Annie's getting sicker and sicker.
Yes.
And
Reese's, and you see a thin, like, Emma's and Annie's stories
they're mirror images.
They're mirror images.
Yes. And I think that's why Reese is so taken with Annie.
Yes.
Because he sees Emma in her.
Yes.
So, like, instantly.
Now, before we get into I do want to talk about this part that I wrote down. After they got back from the revival, of course, Annie's very sick. So Reese, they get back late at night. I know. I was like, okay, we've got to talk about this part.
So good.
Reese doesn't go in the house, but he climbs up the tree to watch her sleep through the window, which sounds very cringe, but it's sweet. He eventually sleeps into her room and he prays over her. He prays, Lord, I'm so He said, I'm not too sure about tonight, meaning the revival.
Yeah.
And I really don't think that preacher has any kind of special deal with you. But I know what I'm trying to say is, if you're all out of options, then let's give Emma my heart. It's a good, strong heart. Well, Emma wakes up and says, you can't give what you don't have because you've already given me your heart.
I was like, oh, how sweet is that? And I love that because you can tell that like the love that they had for each other it started as a tiny little thing as friendship.
Yeah.
You know, when they were young. And then you just kind of watch it flourish and grow into a deep, like abiding love.
Well, and it's very rare for kids this young. And I think that's why I didn't find reading about them as kids as too
off-putting
because that's not the kind of thing that kids normally say to each other.
No.
You know, and so they were both very mature.
Which obviously her health issues probably made her.
Yeah, she was forced to. Because she knew if she didn't get a miracle, she wasn't going to be here. Which brings into the whole, well, when crickets cry, when we get to that part of the story, there's an amazing story about why the title. Yeah.
I think we do need to discuss, though, the well.
The restaurant. Yes. Okay, yeah.
And the character.
I actually had that written down and I X'd it out because I wasn't sure if it. No, go ahead.
I love that though. Like, because like his favorite place to go eat is this place called the Well, which we figure out is a bar.
It's a bar,
and I was like, what? But then you get into the character of Davis, who owns the bar, who is actually a trained minister.
Yeah.
He went to seminary, a couple of different seminaries, like,
yeah.
But he uses the well as an outreach and as a place. And so, okay, back to like our background and our upbringings, a little bit of me was like,
yeah.
Like, is that really? But the more you read about like all of the scenes that took place in there, Davis truly is like reaching out to the lost.
He is.
Every single time.
Yes.
And like even the bar napkins have Bible verses.
They have Bible verses on them.
I was just like, what sneaky.
And the glasses that he serves the alcoholic beverages in have pictures of the 12 apostles.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and how it talks about how like if he sees someone and knows that like they're struggling with alcoholism, he waters their drink down.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how do I? Because initially it kind of brought my hackles up and I was very uncomfortable with it.
It feels very manipulative.
It did.
To me.
But at the same time, like, I'm sure he's successful.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think he's probably, of course.
Because he's leading a Bible study there on Tuesdays.
Yes.
And like having all this great attendance. And so it's like, okay, my question to you then is, does the ends justify the means? How do you feel about that? Because I'm still not real sure how I feel about it.
You mean about it being a bar?
Yes, and like using a bar as outreach.
Well, I mean, I could say in the time we live now, that would never be successful because people are so antagonistic toward anything Christian.
Fair.
Fair.
But you got to remember, this is a small town.
This is a small town, and yeah,
options are limited.
And
he makes a killer burger.
And all of them they're like the heart attack, the transplant.
Yes, I love like the medical type terms for the menu.
Yeah,
hilarious. I loved it.
Now, your question asks for, do ends justify the means? I think probably.
Okay.
What do you think?
I've like I said, I'm still not sure how I feel about it because of how I was raised.
Yeah.
Like I was raised that, we do not give any appearance of evil.
Yes.
So like we eschew
we weren't even allowed to go. Like I was allowed to go to my high school prom, but like going to the proms, like the pastors when I was growing up, they were very against, you do not need to go to the prom.
Really?
They were very against dancing and going to proms because they played secular music, and if you listen to secular music, the devil's gonna get you.
See, and like my upbringing wasn't so strict with that in that we couldn't listen to secular music or anything. My mother, like I said, is a singer. And so she loves, like, she's just a music person. She loves all music, all types of music.
Yeah.
And she kind of brought us up with that. Like, there was not really, I mean, we never really listened to like hard rock or metal or anything like that. But I mean, I grew up on like Journey and the Eagles and
I love
Chicago
80s rock.
Yeah. I mean, 80s rock is my mama's jam.
Yeah.
And so that was I mean, I grew up listening to a lot of them. And I remember in the early 90s listening to a ton of like Celine Dion and Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston. And those are the women that like I would try to sing along with them in the car. And I kind of credit a lot of the ability that I do have. I never took a formal voice lesson in my life. And I don't for 1 minute think I'm like the greatest singer out there or anything. But what ability I do have, I think is because I've tried to pattern myself after those women.
Exactly.
And try to sing
better
along.
than Celine Dion?
And if I can hit, because I know you're a huge fan.
I love Celine
But
Dion.
if I can hit just, a few of the notes that she can hit, then that's all right.
You're better than most. Yeah.
And so we kind of listened to all of that. But like my parents were very like, I guess more particular about like making sure that we weren't around people who smoked or drank or excessively. Now I did have some extended family that did some of those things, but they never did it when we were around because they knew that how my parents felt about it.
Yeah.
And that they felt very strongly about it.
Yeah.
And so, and then like very conservative in how we dressed, the words that we spoke, that was a huge deal. Like I never heard people say curse words growing up. Like I didn't grow up around anybody that cursed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, now
we weren't even allowed to use slang words.
No, yeah, like
CRAP and
or
DARN.
FREAK, freak.
Yes.
That's a big one. Like you didn't say those things.
I remember what my brother, I don't remember what word he said, but he said some form of that. And Mom goes, well, if you're going to do that, you may as well just say the word. Yeah. He said the word, and guess what happened?
Did he get his butt busted?
He got his rear busted.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Mom ain't playing.
Mom not playing. Yeah.
I think one time.
And to this day, Mom will be like, honey, do you really? I'm like, I'm 52. Honey, do you really need to
still correcting your speech?
Yeah, I love my mama. Yeah, she keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Oh, she ain't letting you get off that path, boy.
That's right.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I can remember, I think one time when I was real little, I had heard an aunt say a curse word. And I said it to my mom. And I was young. But I totally threw my aunt under the bus. Like, my mom was like, where did you hear that word? And I was like, Aunt so-and-so.
Because we know you didn't hear it in this house.
She was like, oh. So as a little kid, I was like, I ain't going down for this.
Exactly.
I've never taught it to me. I do remember one time Mom washing all of our mouths out with soap, but I can't remember what we said. It was that Irish Spring green thing.
Oh, the green stuff. Okay, now that we're talking about this, I got to tell you this little story.
Okay.
I don't remember how old we were. We were very young.
Okay.
And we were driving down, not 540, the Midland. We were driving down the Midland, down that road years ago. And it was me, my brother, my cousin Melissa, and my cousin Gary Lynn. He's old now, so it's Gary, but he'll always be Gary Lynn.
Gary Lynn to you.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what we were doing, but Mom kept telling us, you gotta stop it. You gotta stop it. She pulls over on Midland Avenue or whatever road we were on, pulls us all out of the car,
all of you,
and whips us right there beside the road. Now, we all know she would get arrested for that.
Somebody would be calling DHS.
Somebody would be calling, but she pulled us out of the car one by one, and she spanked every one of us right there on Midland Avenue.
And did that... Okay, I'm going to put on my psychologist hat. How did that affect you, Brett?
It did not affect me.
Are you traumatized now? Do you feel like that's a trendy word now? I feel like it is.
Yes.
Like trauma.
Trauma is such a trend word. Yeah. I'm sick of it. And
here's the thing. Everybody's been traumatized too.
Privilege. I'm sick of privilege.
Entitlement.
Entitlement. Yes.
I think we're getting a little off track, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, I have never, I grew up in a family where if we did something wrong, we got our rear end busted.
Yeah. And we did too.
And I do not feel like it has traumatized me in the least. It has made me a better person.
I cannot tell you one specific instance where I ever got a spanking, but I knew that I got spanked. And I know that I did because I deserved them.
Yeah.
And my pastor even talked about that the other day in his sermon. He was talking about that scripture that says that whom the Lord loveth, he chastiseth.
Yes.
I think that's so important. I always tell my kids, like, I don't like to discipline you. It's not a fun thing for me at all. I would much prefer that you just behaved perfectly all the time and I never had to discipline you.
Yes.
But that is not realistic.
That's not real. Well, and the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child.
That's right. And I told my son that even just a couple weeks ago. I was like, listen, if I didn't love you, I would not correct you.
Yeah.
But because I do love you, I do correct you because I don't want you to carry these habits and, make the same mistakes over and over again. I want you to grow and be better.
Well, and I think, you know what it's like when, as a Christian, especially as a mature Christian, we know when God is chastising us for something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that makes us a better person because we're like, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't want to think that.
I don't want to feel like this anymore.
I don't want to feel like this again.
Yeah.
And I kind of parallel that to parents disciplining their kids. I wasn't one of those kids that was always in trouble, but it really hurt my feelings when I got my tushy busted, and it really did, like, okay, I'm not going to do that again because I don't want to replay this.
Yes. Yes.
Now, did you ever, with your kids, have you ever used this hurts me more than it hurts you?
No, I have never said that because I hated it when my parents would say that to me.
I don't know that my parents ever did.
Oh, mine did. My mom would. This hurts me more than it hurts you. Baloney. I'm the one getting my butt wore out, not you.
Your butt is not burning right now. So do not tell me this hurts you more than
Exactly. Yeah, no, I don't say that. Now I will say, I hate this. Like, I don't want to do this. This isn't fun for me. But physically, no, I know you're probably in more pain than I am right now. Like, but you brought it on yourself, bro. So
yeah, my little goddaughter. We are so off track right now. My little goddaughter, Autumn. Mm-hmm. I love her more than life itself.
How old is she?
She's 16 now, so she's not a little girl anymore. But when she was younger, I remember this one time I was over at their house, and she was being she was probably 3 or 4 at the time, and she got a spanking for whatever reason, and of course, it just broke her heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I know she was young because she was still wearing diapers at the time. And when they get
There's
a
so
spanking,
much padding with that.
Yeah,
like,
it's more the sound.
You're just hurting their feelings.
Exactly, it's more the sound than the feel of
Yes.
But she just cried, and I was just like, and I just wanted to reach out, but I'm like, you can't do that.
Yes, I know.
You got to let them have their punishment.
I see, and I don't. I mean, like, I swatted Bellamy the other day because she's in a climbing phase right now. And it scares me that, like, you're going to fall and hurt yourself. You could.
Yeah.
And so I had told her not to climb up on something, and she did it. And so I pulled her down after the 3rd time. I'll tell you twice, and then that 3rd time, I'm going to swat your butt.
Yeah.
And she's in pull-ups still. So, I mean, it didn't hurt her, but it hurt her feelings.
Yes.
And so I swatted her behind, and she starts just crocodile tears immediately. And so I picked her up and hugged her. I was like, listen, Mama doesn't want to spank you. Mama doesn't want to have to swat your behind. But I also don't want you to fall and hurt yourself. So please don't get up there again. And she was like, okay, Mommy, Yeah. But she's 2.5 now. And when I bust her or get onto her in any way, like even if I just correct her vocally, do you know what she does now? She goes running to her big brother and she's like, Mommy got me. And I'm like, oh, don't even. And he'll every time, I'm sorry, sissy.
Oh,
I'm
so
like,
he comforts her.
Yes, he's her comforter. He's her big protector. Like,
that's sweet.
She's going to go tell on Mommy to Bubby. And that's the end of it.
He's going to be the kind of brother that cracks heads if anybody anybody messes with his
You know what?
sister.
And him and Stella, like, they fight a lot. They're at those ages now. I mean, he's 12, she's 9. They just clash heads all the time. And she does everything she can to annoy him. Like, that's her goal.
She pushes buttons.
It is her purpose in life. She just does. But they are also each other's best friends. And, like, they will not let anybody mess with their sibling.
And that's how siblings are. I can say whatever I want to my brother, but you can't.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me and my sisters are that way.
Yeah.
Like, I can call you a dirty old hag, but that person can't. And if they do, I'm going to come after them.
Exactly. Heads will roll if you talk to my brother or sister the way I talk to my brother.
Because, like, we call each other, I mean, just all the time goofing off. Morgan will be like, hey, heifer, or something like that. But if somebody else were to walk up to her and do that and be serious, oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you.
Yeah.
And it goes that way for all of us.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.